Hello friends, let's have a good look at the development of the tongue. The tongue is an important organ of taste, alright? So it is a very sensitive organ which have active involvement in chewing, swallowing, and speech. The embryonic development of the tongue is a very complicated process that begins around the 4th week or 5th week of gestation. So the development of the tongue have a very significant effect on the oral cavity, which we commonly known as the mouth. The tongue starts to develop around the 4th week of intrauterine life, that is when the baby is still in the womb. The first, second, third, and fourth pharyngeal arches all contribute to the development of various parts of the tongue. The development of the tongue starts with the growth of a median swelling. This growth of the median swelling is from the first pharyngeal arch and it is called the tuberculum impar, or you can simply call it the median tongue board. Little by little, the two lateral lingual swellings start to grow in the 5th week from the same first pharyngeal arch. As the two lateral lingual swelling increase in size, they eventually merge together and then overlap the tuberculum impar. The anterior 2/3 of the tongue is formed from the merging of these two lateral lingual swellings. Since the mucosa that overlies this area of the tongue, I mean the anterior 2/3 of the tongue, has its origin from the first pharyngeal arch, it receives its sensory innervation from the mandibular branch of the 5th cranial nerve, which is the trigeminal nerve. As for the remaining posterior 1/3 of the tongue, it is formed from another median swelling called the hypobranchial eminence, or you can call it the copula. This hypobranchial eminence is formed from the mesoderm of the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th pharyngeal arches. The mucosa overlying this posterior 1/3 of the tongue receives its sensory innervation from the 9th cranial nerve, which is the glossopharyngeal nerve. The posteriormost part of the tongue, which is simply the back of the tongue, develops from the 3rd median swelling, arising from the 4th pharyngeal arch. This posteriormost part of the tongue gets its innervation from the superior laryngeal nerve, which is a branch of the vagus nerve, that is the 10th cranial nerve. The muscles of the tongue are mainly derived from the myoblast, which originates in the occipital somites. They receive their innervation from the 12th cranial nerve, which is the hypoglossal nerve. The only muscle that doesn't get its innervation from the hypoglossal nerve is the palatoglossus muscle. The palatoglossus muscle receives its nerve supply from the vagus nerve. Please note that the palatoglossus muscle originates from the soft palate and passes through the tongue in a transverse manner. Let's take a close look at the muscles of the tongue. The muscles of the tongue are grouped into two. We have the intrinsic and the extrinsic muscle. The extrinsic muscles are 4 in number. They include the genioglossus muscle, the palatoglossus muscle, the styloglossus muscle, and the hyloglossus muscle. They all originate from the structures that are adjacent to the tongue. The function of these extrinsic muscles of the tongue is to move or simply allow movement of the tongue in all directions. As for the intrinsic muscles of the tongue, there are 4 paired intrinsic muscles. They are the superior longitudinal, the inferior longitudinal, the verticalis, and the transverse muscle. They have their origin as well as their insertion inside the tongue. The function of these intrinsic muscles of the tongue are for changing the shape of the tongue. At the 8th week of gestation, the very first sign of development of taste bud on the lingual epithelium occurs. Between the 9th and 11th week of gestation, many taste bud primordia, that is the early taste bud, develop. They differentiate into different cell types around the 11th through the 13th post-ovulatory week. During this period, taste spores also develop. Alright guys, in the next video we'll look at the functions of the tongue properly. Don't forget to subscribe if you feel that this video was helpful enough to you. God bless you and God keep you. See you in the next video.